One thing I like to do a lot is look at the players who stick out in a season. You get to see real patterns from different kinds of players. So quite often it's fun to look at some of the players who didn't quite fit in. For this IPL season, it's more of the same. I've looked at all the bowlers who've taken more than 200 wickets. Their size of their dots actually tells you how many wickets they took. So let's start down here with this dot, because wow, that's some obscenely low economy. And of course, it's for Sunil Narine, a player who just had an incredible year. And to do this after fixing your bowling action and having to invent new balls is, wow, remarkable. At the start of the last IPL, I had no idea if he was even still a frontline player. And with his batting dropping off, this was a perfect time to be, this good with the ball. It's also worth looking up here at his bowling partner, Varun Chakravarti, who had a truly horrible season. Coming in, KKR would have hoped for them to form a pincer-like movement in the middle, which is basically what they did at the back end of last year as they flew up in the table. The problem is that Chakravarti seems to only take wickets when he is not in India, and he also goes for a lot of runs at home. We don't have much data for that series in Sri Lanka, but we know he absolutely kills it in the UAE. But in India, it's actually crazy how much he has struggled there. I don't think I've ever seen a pattern like this before. But it's the economy that's really interesting, because elite finger spinners are usually at least low on economy. Narine is low, but you can see a bunch of finger spinners with a low economy here. Here's Akshar Patel, who struggled to take wickets this year, and for him had what you would have to say is an incredibly poor season. He'd be disappointed to be on this end, but again, his economy is not that bad. He has, though, had some poor years before. The last one was probably 2018. The 3 years before this were actually kind of incredible for him. I'm not sure how he'll look at this season because he didn't go for runs but just couldn't take any wickets. But that does happen to finger spinners. For instance, let's have a look at this one. Ashwin. And if you want me to go further, here's Krunal Pandya. We know that finger spinners are going to go for fairly low economies. And in Krunal Pandya's case, he's kind of had the opposite journey to Akshar Patel. After 2 terrible years, completely flew back into bowling form and also made runs when he hadn't for a little while now. He went for a lot of money and, let's be honest, he was completely worth it. And it's not quite the IPL he had for the first couple of years, but at least it's a facsimile of that. So let's have a look at some of the wrist spinners. And the most interesting one, of course, is Rashid Khan. And he's interesting because he has an economy like a finger spinner while he takes wickets like a wrist spinner. But when you move across here, you'll see that there are other leg spinners who took even more wickets than him. Chahal was the leading wicket taker this year. I think I said at the start of the season that he was massively underpaid, but even I didn't see a year as good as this coming up. Hasaranga might be even more interesting. He had 2 years in one. The first, he was a handy overseas bowler, taking some wickets and causing problems, but teams were scoring from him. He was going at 9 runs and over at that point and averaging 27. The second part of his year, he averaged 10.76 and went a smidge over a run a ball. That's incredible. It was impossible to score off him or even stay in. Even if he can keep up only one of those things, he's going to have one hell of a career. So let's have a look at a little bit of pace, shall we? This is Umesh Yadav, who had some season. Remember, he wasn't particularly wanted coming in. And you can see him on the same econ plane over here as Bhuvi and also Jasprit Bumrah. But clearly, Umesh had the best average. But this actually masks how important his average was this year, as he only bowled 2 overs at the death. So all of his wickets were in the power player middle, meaning they were just worth a lot more to his team. He actually delivered 2 overs in the death all season and got completely smashed. They used him for what he was good at, and he found magical form to completely back up KKR. While they used Andre Russell to do all the grunt work at the death that Umesh Yadav is not really that used to. But Russell wasn't the only all-rounder made to do tough things. Let's have a look at Shardul Thakur, who went for the most runs in the IPL this year. This is a lot of overs for a bowler who isn't an obviously elite player at any period of the game when he's got the ball in his hand. In the 2 years before this, his numbers have been better, but he's a bowler who, even when handled really well, still goes for more than 8 and over. Unfortunately though, this year it was actually 9. In fact, over the last 2 seasons when he has been used as a frontline bowler, he has allowed 1,016 runs. That is a lot more than the next best bowler. His average has been around 28, though this year he did take his wickets at 32. I just think assuming that he'll be one of your automatic bowlers is a stretch for him. And it's a shame because he can take wickets and this was his best batting year. But he's still the only bowler who's allowed more than 500 runs in the last 2 years at worse than 9 economy. He's the least economical regular bowler in the IPL. And you can see him here in a cluster of all-rounders. This is Jason Holder. Just below him is Daniel Sams. All of them get over-bowled because they offer a second skill, but they all go for a lot of runs. And talking about a lot of runs, or kind of the opposite I suppose, here's Arshdeep Singh, who has probably got more attention in maybe his previous years. But I think for me, this was his best year by far. When you see local bowlers take a lot of wickets, but also go for runs, it's hard to know if they can be consistent. But what Arshdeep has done is something quite interesting. This year he stopped taking wickets, but started having a low economy, dropping half a run from last season. But where he dropped them is the weirdest thing. He bowled an almost equal amount in the power play, middle and death. And yet it was at the death he had the lowest economy. And it was a decent amount lower as well. Before this, T. Natarajan was probably seen as the premier left-arm seamer for India. And he had a good early part of the year. But he went for a lot of runs and Arshdeep seems to have leapfrogged him. But of all the players to lose their reputation the most, the worst would have to be Mohammad Siraj. Because he was actually, the worst. What a surprisingly bad year on economy and average. Remember last year, his economy was 6.7. To be pushing 10 from there is incredible. And the year before, he did actually go for runs, but averaged 21. Even in those earlier years where his economy was always a little bit out of control, there was usually something in his bowling. This was by far the worst year when it comes to economy and average that Mohammad Siraj has ever had. That feels like he was playing when he was not fit to me. But it's a huge kick to Bangalore who retained him. He was probably saved by Harshal Patel, who had another incredible year. Again, he gets much of his praise for bowling at the death, but his wicket taking in the middle is extraordinary. I think this was a better year than last year, and that's saying a lot because, he took 1 million wickets last year. And talking about players who had a better year than other ones where he has been lauded, let's finish with the king of that, Kagiso Rabada. Often he's been talked up as the guy with all the wickets, but many of those have been cheap ones at the death. This year he took 9 wickets in the power play and added a few more at better than 20 when he was bowling in the middle as well. The thing we know about Rabada is that even from Test cricket, he's always going to go for runs, but he's also going to take wickets at a faster rate than anyone else. But for him to have the kind of impact he should in T20 cricket, those wickets have to come all the way through the innings. This year, he did that. Anyway, that's my look at the bowling outliers for the IPL this year. So remember, like, subscribe, hit the belly thing, buy me a coffee, and I suppose I'll crack on and look at the batters. 99.94 is my new venture. It is Cricket's Conversation. We are looking for people to sign up to our beta launch at the moment. And if you want more information about what it is, just click on the 99.94 logo and head over to the site. At 99.94, we talk cricket.